for a stretch of older company history that now feels almost unreal. The Tuxedo match occupied a strange corner of World Wrestling Entertainment's presentation. It was not built around violence in the usual sense. It was built around humiliation, spectacle, and the deliberate destruction of dignity. Instead of chasing a pinfall or a submission, the goal was to strip an opponent out of formal wear. That alone tells you what kind of era this match belonged to. It came from a version of the company that often treated embarrassment as entertainment and novelty, as enough of a hook to carry an entire stipulation. That is what makes the Tuxedo match so fascinating now. It was never meant to feel like a serious athletic contest. It was designed to be visual, silly, and instantly understandable. A wrestler in a tuxedo was already an unusual sight into the ring. The moment the match began, the whole point was to turn that formality into chaos. The gimmick was simple, and that simplicity gave it short-term appeal. Fans did not need a long explanation. They understood immediately that this was a match built less around competition and more around public humiliation. For a while, that fit neatly into how the company sometimes used gimmick matches. Not every stipulation was meant to feel dangerous or career-defining. Some were there to settle grudges in unusual ways, showcase personality, or create a memorable television segment. That is where the Tuxedo match lived. It was not a cornerstone attraction. It was a side road, a theatrical detour the company could use when it wanted absurdity, embarrassment, or a change of pace. And yet, that very quality is also why the match never became especially important. A tuxedo match could be amusing once. It could even be memorable in the right setting, but it was hard to build real stakes around it. A ladder match can headline major feuds. A cage match can end rivalries. A tuxedo match, by comparison, was usually too lightweight to carry that kind of weight. It existed closer to comedy, novelty, and character work than to the company's more durable specialty matches. The company's own archive reflects that strange place in its history. In 2002, it presented an evening gown versus tuxedo match between Lillian Garcia and Howard Finkel, the kind of pairing that says a lot about the tone of that period. Years later, in 2009, the company used a renamed variation called the Sharp-Dressed Man tuxedo match between Hornswoggle and Chavo Guerrero on Raw. Then, in 2012, the concept returned on pay-per-view when Santino Marella faced Ricardo Rodriguez in what the company itself called the return of the tuxedo match. That pattern says a great deal. The match never disappeared entirely, but it surfaced only occasionally, usually as a novelty rather than as anything central to the company's identity. That is really the forgotten era of the tuxedo match. Not a golden age, but a period when World Wrestling Entertainment was far more willing to turn formal wear into a wrestling stipulation and let absurdity do the rest. The match lingered because it was easy to stage, easy to explain, and easy to remember. But it also remained limited because it was difficult to treat as anything more than a curiosity. Its entire identity was built around embarrassment, and embarrassment does not always age well. Over time, the company moved further away from that style of presentation. As World Wrestling Entertainment shifted into a more controlled, more image-conscious, and more family-oriented direction, older gimmicks rooted in humiliation became less natural fits. The company did not need to issue some grand declaration ending the tuxedo match. It simply stopped using it. That is often how minor gimmicks disappear. They do not end with controversy or fanfare. They just stop matching the tone of the product. And that is why the tuxedo match feels forgotten now. It was never a disaster on the level of the company's most infamous experiments, but it was never important enough to survive on tradition alone. It belonged to a looser, stranger, more openly gimmick-driven version of World Wrestling Entertainment, where a match could exist simply because the visual was odd enough to get attention. Once the company evolved, the tuxedo match was left behind with a lot of other novelty concepts that no longer fit the image the company wanted to project. In the end, that is the real story of the tuxedo match. It was a product of an era when spectacle and humiliation could be enough to justify a stipulation. It lasted in fragments, reappeared in odd moments, and never quite became important. But that is also what makes it worth remembering. The tuxedo match is not just a forgotten gimmick. It is a reminder of a time when World Wrestling Entertainment was willing to make almost anything into a match, as long as it looked strange enough once the bell rang.